The other dimension to this that I find really disturbing, I'll just use the latest news to open up the broader conversation. But it was just announced, I believe yesterday, or a couple of days ago. No, actually, this is a report from today. Ecuador just inks a $4.2 billion financing deal with the IMF, and it's announced by Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno. Now, there's a bigger story about this in terms of Moreno, Rafael Correa, who Lenin Moreno is, and also I would say the broader kind of U.S.-backed reassertion of far-right forces across Latin America, the reversal of the pink tide, which is a big part of this show. But, I mean, talk about the loan and maybe use that as a door to explain just who Lenin Moreno is.
Yeah, I mean, the loans were announced, I think, Friday. So they didn't even wait a couple of days to let things digest before they, up and bestowed something like $10 billion of bailout money on Ecuador. And, granted, a lot of it's coming from the IMF and the World Bank, which means a lot of pain and austerity for Ecuador coming up, which, is not exactly a good thing. But still, I mean, three of the institutions, there were four institutions in total that put together this $10 billion bailout package. Three of them, the IMF, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank, the United States is the largest shareholder in all three of them and controls, vastly more voting power than it even kind of directly holds, because it basically controls most of the European vote. It controls a lot of the Americas votes from places like Canada and elsewhere, and Brazil, which is a large voting member, and especially the Inter-American Development Bank. Jair Bolsonaro isn't going to do anything that Donald Trump doesn't want him to do in that regard. So it's interesting that, and certainly, Moreno has been talking to the IMF and these other institutions for a while about doing a bailout, but I think the coincidence is sort of inescapable that, like, the day after, in the hours after he withdrew Assange's asylum, suddenly you see all these institutions that the United States effectively controls, or at least has a great deal of control over, freeing up billions of dollars for the Venezuelan economy. Moreno's an interesting character. I mean, he was Correa's vice president, and then he was nominated in the 2017 election by Correa's party. He had Correa's endorsement and blessing, but he's since kind of shifted right. I mean, he's not as hard right as some other governments in the region, certainly, but kind of in the face of I think shifting political ground around him, and with Ecuador running into a little bit of economic challenge, he's kind of gravitated toward the right, the center right or right wing, and he's embracing things like austerity economics and trying to make nice with the Trump administration, and he's really done a 180 almost in terms of his own politics.
But I mean, and in some ways, though, it's even more like, just a little bit of context. I mean, Rafael Correa was actually, one of the things that was fascinating about the pink tide is that these are all very distinct, there's a lot of personalities, right? I mean, all of them cut quite a profile, whether it's, Hugo Chavez, obviously, or Lula, or Cristina Kirchner, or Evo Morales, and Rafael Correa was like no exception. And, governed Ecuador in a very interesting way. He did a lot of very significant redistribution. One area of very valid criticism of him actually was definitely in environmental and indigenous rights areas, where there was really big problems, because the kind of bigger structural problem of all of these countries relying for social progress on commodities, and in Ecuador's case, it's oil. But on the other hand, he was willing to, probably closer to the sort of Chavez orbit, be very directly adversarial with the usual typical imperial U.S. relationship in the region. And, he said that withdrawing Assange's asylum is like one of the greatest, shames in Ecuador's history. And then just as a button to that, it's not just that Lenin Moreno has, ran as the leader of the party and then made, I think a pretty sharp turn right. It's that there's another case here in Latin America, and in Correa's case, he's in Belgium on a teaching fellowship, but of what looks to be a trumped-up kidnapping charge against him. And, Moreno put out an Interpol notice and basically wants Correa to come back and go to jail. And so far, the Europeans have actually not cooperated because apparently, there's a lot of questions about just how just how substantive the charges are. But it's really striking that not only is he from the same party and has made this reversal, but he's also following this other pattern. Obviously, most prominently is the case of Lula, but there's, I know less about the Christina Kirchner case. It might be more substantive, but I think it's very bizarre timing that they're trying to strip her immunity from, her Senate seat when she's gearing up to maybe reclaim the presidency from Macri. And again, the Kirchners did actually deliver some very significant things for Argentina, particularly in terms of liberating it from the World Bank and IMF. So, Moreno's not only, I guess what I'm saying is it's not just a sort of pragmatic, let's deal with things as they are sort of move. He's chosen to aggressively reverse course. And this is another thing I think that you can't separate the Assange case from, which is that this broader reversal in Latin America, which is bad for progressive prospects.
Yeah, I think what's interesting in Moreno's case, in all the other cases in Argentina and Brazil, in Colombia, in all these other places, the switch has come with a change of the party in power. There's been an election, and the right has been ascendant in the election, and then they've, not only, as you say, not only have they reversed course policy-wise, but they've gone to some lengths to criminalize being on the left, or to criminalize these leaders of the pink wave, to kind of ensure that there's no way they can get back into power. In Moreno's case, there really hasn't been a shift in party. He's just taken the party over and taken it in the same direction. I think that's the thing that kind of sets him apart. But it is part of regional kind of wave. I think you're right to say that.
And I think disturbingly, like some of the reporting from some of the strategists involved in the left in Ecuador was actually that even some of the kind of indicators where there was some problems in Correa's first term, where maybe there might have been an opportunity for more democratization of the party and sort of more kind of better policies overall, even than Correa, instead of this like horrible reversal that Moreno represents. And, this stuff implicates a lot of things. Even like the fact that Ecuador pulled its funding for Telesur. I think Telesur, again, I wouldn't rely on any one media source in and of itself. But the bottom line is, I think Telesur in particular, that's a source that you're going to get a perspective from, just as frankly an anti-U.S. imperial perspective in Latin America, that you're just not going to get elsewhere in general. I know obviously like the Real News Network, and then there's, and Democracy Now! And so on. And then shows like this, I think, provide really important comment, and your work, there's really important commentary and analysis. But there wasn't an attempt to say like, all right, if there's all these global news outlets that supposedly represent different geographies and ideologies, we need one that represents the sort of like anti-imperial stance of Latin America. So pulling out of that is also, important in terms of undermining ideology and broader diplomatic efforts. So, I think we can't separate this Assange thing from this big reversal in Latin America and the betrayal of Lenin Moreno.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. I think that's a great point.
Are you going to have your guy follow me back?
I mean, if I can get him out of his stupor, I'll definitely get on it. Yeah.
Are you going to Klobuchar him?
Well, like I said, I mean, these combs aren't going to clean themselves. So yeah, I gotta,
It's like picturing Davidson looking up like, I need something on the early Ottoman period to illustrate this point. And give me my fucking salad comb. I want a salad.
like whipping big volumes of the Cambridge History of Islam at the guy.
Yeah. Well, I like you see, that's, you can tell Davidson's got comedic chops because of the specificity of the references.
No, I just looked over at my bookshelf and looked at the biggest book I could find.
Whatever works. How can people? What's going on? So okay, so tell us again though about the new way that people can find you and what kind of things you're going to be doing over there.
Yeah, so I'm at again, it's foreign exchanges at Substack, fx.substack.com. I've got my nightly world news roundups. I'm doing podcasting. I'm doing commentaries, and you can find it at the site. You can follow me or you can follow the site on Twitter at FX_newsletter. You can follow me on Twitter at DW Davison, and lots of ways to track people down these days, I guess.
Much appreciated, man. Thanks so much for doing this. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Michael. Take care.
Take care. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.